Good morning, everybody. I'd really like to thank Creative Mornings for the invitation to be here. It's really exciting. And partly of what's exciting is actually facing the group, because usually I'm like this, and it's the back of my head. So it's really nice to be standing here and actually sharing my work with you, which is something that I'm really passionate about. Before I get going, I want to introduce one other very important person in the room, and that's my colleague over here, Amanda Fenton. And Amanda is going to be visualizing my talk, but what actually makes Amanda as special as her talents with visualization is that she actually co-founded this Creative Mornings and Creative Mornings Vancouver. So she uses all of her skills around conversation and building community. So it's great to be here with Amanda. So thanks. So I am a graphic facilitator. And one of the questions that people always ask me is, what's that? So I use visuals at meetings, and I use them to help people make connections, solve problems, and lead. So I draw what's happening on real time on giant paper. And sometimes it's with groups with 5, and sometimes it's at conferences of 500. So graphic facilitation is visual language, and I love my job. So as you know, the world has never been more visual. I don't have to convince anybody in this room. Photography, images, social media, infographics, GIFs, images are all around us. But here's the thing. I can think in pictures, and you can think in pictures. But unless we're sharing a common language, we're not actually communicating. So I think if we're sharing a visual language, we're going to communicate better. So let's take all the visuals around us and use them with groups. So I get 2 reactions when I tell people what I do. The first reaction is like, oh yeah, totally, great, okay. And the other type of reaction is, okay, but why? And it happens. So I want you to think back. I want you to think back to a time when you were at a meeting. And I want you to think back to a time where you were at a bad meeting. The kind of meeting that had no purpose. It had no agenda. See, I know. The kind of meeting that probably should have been a 2-line email. The kind where, you know that guy, the one with the loudest voice, their ideas always won. So you probably left feeling defeated, disconnected, and that your work didn't have that sense of purpose. Okay, but I'm here, and the reason I'm here is I have great news. There's hope for meetings. Meetings that can provide space for that meaningful dialogue between people. Meetings that build connection and that can awaken your creativity and get us all ready for those big challenges. But we have to shake things up. So visual language is the monkey wrench that's going to stop the bad meeting machine and also be that tool that's going to help build a more creative way of working together. And this is how it works. So visual language is really intuitive. If I'm working and you're talking and I draw an arrow that goes this way, you get what I mean. We need to talk about going this way. And if I draw this, you understand that it's also about that possibility of that third space. And this guy, right? Right, you also get it. This is an immediate part of our visual vocabulary now. So these icons have become part of our culture. So I use a combination when I'm working of basic building blocks. These are shapes, squares, circles, arrows, really things that anybody can draw. But then you add in the stuff that makes it special. So color, lines, typography, motion, and again, more icons better than the one that you just saw. So this is kind of what it looks like. And it can be really easy, but it can also get really complicated quickly. So as the one holding the pens in the room, I have a great responsibility to represent what's happening. So I think a lot about who I am and why I'm there. I think a lot about my presence. I think a lot about the equity issues that are going on. I think about what's unsaid and what's underneath the surface. I do a lot of work cross-culturally, and you can't reduce everything to an icon. Culture is not an icon. So I find a way to work with my clients ahead of time to figure out how to best serve and honor the stories that are in the room. Which leads to an interesting point. In my field right now, there's this really interesting tension around process and product. Because as this field grows, and I'm thrilled to see it's growing because I think it's important, you see a lot of images that are shared online. And some of these are absolutely fantastic people that blow me away with what they can draw. And I'm nowhere close to that, let me tell you. But there's this difference between process and product. And so when you look at those images, you actually can't tell if that was the best thing that the group needed. So this is interesting. So process and product. If I'm working with a group, for example, I might be drawing the world's messiest map, and that's never going to make it to the internet. It might be a diagram that we go through 6, 7 times until we finally land on what's actually important. And if I had come in and I had drawn a beautiful stream with little rocks and pretty flowers, that might have been nice, but didn't actually serve what was needed. So the question really is, for me, how does this serve the group? How does this serve the room? Okay, I think anyone can use more visual language. And if you leave here with one thing today, I want you to know this. It's intuitive, I know you can do it, and if you do it, I think you're going to be more creative and probably more effective. So, it's the question I get asked a lot is, how long have you been doing this? And the short answer is the one that I usually give, which is 5 years. But the real answer is it's also been 15 years. So 15 years ago, I worked at a university, and I was the staff person for the Center for Queer Students on campus. And, you know, maybe it's because I worked at a university for so long that my other superpower is looking like I'm always 20 years old. But I know, right? You were wondering, I know. So I ran several meetings a week, and these were not the gray and boring meetings that we're all used to. These students were super passionate about coming together and making connection and working for social justice. So I took that passion with me everywhere that I worked afterwards. I ran focus groups for mental health, I worked doing labor relations, and I worked with people with disabilities. And so generally, I became a really good facilitator. But outside of work, I made art in all of my spare time. I did a lot of illustration and printmaking and letterpress. And this is where I have to say thank you to my mom, who lets me keep a printing press the size of a car in her East Vancouver garage. So eventually, all these things combined, and I made the big leap, and I left my nonprofit career to illustrate and make art full time. But you know, I hit a crossroads that I'm sure people here can identify with, that the art that I was making wasn't always related to the issues that I cared the most about. So so what happened was somebody sent me a link, and I discovered that there was this field of graphic facilitation, and I found my fit. I found out that there were people like me who thought in pictures and who wanted to use deep listening skills and be wildly creative every day. So, I want to tell you about 3 things. That visual language affects how we feel, how we communicate, and what actions we take. This is the heart, head, and hands. People care when they see that their ideas matter. So I love seeing how excited people get when I draw out and visualize what they're talking about. So it's actually this moment where you're taking what they're saying and putting it into the bigger conversation. So I was working with a very small session. I was working with, and I should say that this was a workshop led by Jackie Wong, who was in the audience today, working for the BCGEU. So we were in the room, and there was 3 of us, and it was a woman who had left domestic violence, her social worker, and me. And I was mapping out her story. And she was being interviewed about all the ways that the system had failed her. And it was a myriad of ways that the system wasn't working. And so what I was doing was drawing this out, giant paper. And she turned around at the end, and she looked up, and she said, "I've never seen my story in one place before." And she had tears in her eyes. And it was this really powerful moment. And the social worker was going to take these maps, because we did 3 of them, and bring them to a regional meeting. And the regional meeting was going to be where all the service providers got together and figured out how to fix the gaps in services. And what I learned is that if we just prioritize text, we are missing an opportunity. But if we go bold and prioritize visuals, something else happens. And what happened was that woman's voice made it to the meeting with all the suits. Information makes more sense with visuals. Okay, did anybody tell you to not doodle when you were a kid in class? Right, this happens. I hope it doesn't happen to you, because by now the benefits of doodling have made it to Time Magazine, the Wall Street Journal, the Lancet. Doodles and drawing while you're listening is an incredibly powerful way of focusing and retaining information. I can type as fast as you can talk, right? I'm sure everybody here at this point types as fast as people talk, but it doesn't mean that the information is going in a useful way. So when I'm a participant, maybe I'm in the audience somewhere or I'm in school, I'm taking my notes and pictures. And in our field, we call this sketchnoting. And shout out to January 11th with Mike Roddy. It's International World Sketchnote Day. So this is your chance. But when I'm working, it's a bit different. So I can draw personally, take my own sketch notes and share them, and that's great. But when I'm at work, I'm drawing to help other people retain information. So an example is when I was at a conference. It was a 2-day conference for neuroethicists, and I had to practice how to say that before I showed up for work, neuroethicists, who were doing a conference on brain science and social responsibility. And there were 2 of us visualizing this conference. And we mapped out 50 feet of images over these 2 days, and it wrapped around this entire room. And it goes to show how much information you are supposed to remember as a participant at a conference. And so the visuals were great. They were a high-level synthesis that was this powerful tool for someone to come in on day 2 and review everything that had happened. So it was a way of organizing and retaining the information. But this other interesting thing happens with graphic facilitation. It becomes a tool that's interactive. So you can be walking around and looking at these images, but also turn to the person next to you and say, okay, what did you notice? Or I like how this thing here connects to this talk over here, and they were in different rooms. So it's a way of organizing the information. Visuals motivate people, and you can show your call to action. So often, that meeting that we all talked about, you can leave those meetings feeling like they were a waste of time. And part of that is because we don't know the purpose, but also part of it is that we don't know about the follow-up. So with graphic facilitation, there is this immediate tool that you can use to send out to people. And this is important. It tells people what the next steps are, and it's motivating because you can see everything that's there, and it's this thing that actually inspires people to share it with their teams. It's a little bit harder to share like a list or to share a PowerPoint. It's just not as exciting at this point. And this keeps the momentum going. But if I'm in a session and we're mapping out the thing, sometimes it's not always ready to send out as is. So, for example, strategic plans. We might do all of the work to figure out a company's vision, mission, and goals while we're together, but it sometimes needs to get into the computer to really kind of bring it all together. And so these are big maps, just to show you an example of how you can take the process and make it into a more finished product. And one group that I really love that took it really to the next level is the YMCA of Greater Vancouver. And so we worked on their strategic planning process, and they literally printed chunks of it on a flower pot. And they put a plant in it, and they gave it to every manager to put on their desks. And it became this evergreen, living document. And I couldn't think of a better way of showing how to actually motivate people for change. Okay, so I know what you're thinking. Sam, this is a lot of drawing. This is a lot of drawing, and I'm not a good artist, so what am I gonna do? It's okay. I think that you can use visual language anywhere in groups without being a graphic facilitator. So first, you can start with the basic building blocks. These are the shapes, the arrows, the squares, the circles. These are really basic shapes, and people are gonna love seeing it, really. It's okay if it's messy, and it's okay if your drawings aren't perfect. but I'm probably not convincing many people. Okay, so say you're not ready to start trying drawing in front of full groups, and that's totally okay. You can also use apps. There are great apps out there. There's the Noun Project, there's Canva, and something called Rocket Picks. You can also work with a designer. So again, bringing digital tools to create visual summaries and start getting this information out into the groups that you work with. But visual language isn't just about summaries. It can also change actually how you approach a meeting or how you do that work in gatherings with people. So you can change the format. It sounds easy, but it's actually really important. You can change the format from presentations to something that's more small group oriented and conversational. So the Post-it note, the humble Post-it note, is going to be your friend. You can get people to put their ideas on Post-it notes and make a giant timeline. You can get them to map them in affinity groups. You can get them to move things around on walls and group ideas together. My favorite thing right now is to use visual templates. And these are big maps that you make ahead of time and you give groups. All you have to do is fill them in. And what I like about them is that it helps groups self-facilitate better because they can see the next steps that they're going to be working on. And you can buy them, but I like to make them that way it matches with the actual branding and the specific question that group needs. And this is also something that I really love because visual storytelling can you can tap into visual storytelling with photos. So photos are really accessible to us. You can use your phones, you can get people to go out to take photos, and also you can buy these pre-printed photo cards. And what's great is that people talk in metaphors when you ask them to talk about photos. So for example, we'd bring in a set of these photos and they're all on the table and we're talking about leadership. And I might ask you to pick a card that speaks about leadership and you pick one of a duck on a pond. And then you tell me that you picked it because the pond is leadership because the waters are smooth and calm. Great. And then the next person a week later might pick that card and tell me it's because the duck is paddling madly underneath the surface. And getting like a vice president or somebody to talk in a metaphor like that, just kind of out of the blue, isn't going to happen very easily without that photo tool to kind of kickstart those conversations. And that's the power of using visuals, but again, no drawing. So I think that you know that I'm really passionate about the possibility of visual language changing how we reshape communication with groups. And I think all you need is a pen and something worth communicating. So when a little bit later today, you're gonna be in small groups, and I have something for you that's gonna help kind of kickstart your new visual language of 2016. And this is a gift for you that I made, and it's called a creativity planner. And the reason I made it is a little bit selfish, and that's because I'm sure, like everybody else, I am very good at prioritizing other people's creative projects. Right? And I'm not so good. I'm much better at procrastinating when it comes to me. So it's 2016 and it's January, and I thought it would be a good time to make something that was a planning tool and also about creativity. So if you find yourself alphabetizing your record collection, you're like, oh yeah, the thing that Sam made, right, okay. So, yes. But importantly, visual language is not just about the pretty pictures. It's what you do with them that matters. So I invite you to fill it in. I want you to phone a friend and do it together. Maybe the freelance group that we heard about, which sounds fantastic. That would be a great place to find the support that you need to actually do the work that matters. Because I know that you have a big goal, and I want you to feel that it's closer than ever. So thanks very much. Thanks.
Some of you might have seen us make mention of a new product that Wacom has called a Bamboo Spark. And so wave it around. So there's a Bamboo Spark. And a Bamboo Spark is basically an iPad case. It's just a thin little iPad. It's nothing. You can slip your iPad right there, and it comes with a pen. It's kind of cool. And some artwork drawn by somebody named Sam Brad.
No, not this one.
Not this one?
No,
the other stuff. A whole bunch of their artwork is by Sam Brad. And this is just a pad of paper. It's just regular paper. This is literally just paper. And this is a ballpoint pen. But what'd I do? Anyway, there's a joke I don't know about. So Amanda was live sketching as she was going, and there's magic in this here device. You can literally transfer by pressing this button. Boop! Everything you drew on the paper jumps to your digital device in digital form. And as of last night, any handwriting you wrote, even if it's scripty, converts to text.
Yeah.
What?
To text.
Is that cool or what? So Amanda literally did this on the fly. These are her visualizations as she was listening to Sam talk. And isn't that a cool idea? Yeah. More on that later. Okay, so questions. Sam, stage.
Okay.
I have a question to start us off.
Yeah.
How do you know, you said about the importance of a really critical part of your process is knowing when you're reaching them, right? Like knowing when the audience, you're really representing their story and how do you know when that's happening?
Yeah, so our field talks a lot about impact, and it's one of those questions. You actually never know how to measure impact, so you have to find your own ways of doing that. You can listen in the moment for the times when the room gets really quiet, and you know that that is clearly something that is very key to that group that you want to make sure is made it into the pictures. But really, it's a lot about the prep work ahead of time. So it's kind of like design work, where 80% is really like everything that you don't see, and then the last part is what you draw. So ahead of time, you are working with the client to understand their culture of the organization, what they actually want for the objectives for the meeting. You're trying to figure out if there's jargon that you have to kind of unpack. All of those things help you prep for what's going in. And I mean, in an ideal world, I get stuff ahead of time, so I know the list of the things that they want, and sometimes you don't. Especially doctors, you don't.
Could you explain to all of my clients ever about that 80% upfront work thing and the 20%? Jeez Louise. Who
We'll
has a
work on your
question for Sam?
invoicing too, sure.
Yeah, could you do my invoicing too? Thanks.
Okay.
My name is Todd Smith. Just to elaborate on what you just said, in the unpacking of a specific domain, how far down that path do you go to get on the same page of something really buried in academia? I imagine that's part of the facilitation process, but just for your own personal process.
Yeah, this is a perfect question. I'm so glad somebody asked this. This is the big thing that the field is talking about right now. Is it better to have an outsider ear or better to be embedded and coming from a specific place? And there's benefits to both. And I think the important part is that you choose and you choose wisely. So sometimes I'll be working for a company and I don't know anything about what they do, like installing power lines, for example. But what we're talking about is consistent across multiple businesses. We're talking about operations or communicating or HR, and so those are the things that it's actually valuable to be a consultant because I'm drawing from all of the experiences I've had. So even though I'm an outsider, I'm bringing value to that meeting. Sometimes it's more important to be embedded in that particular domain, and everybody has those choices. For me, it's when I get to do work around anti-racism and anti-Indigenous racism, that's really important to me, that I'm actually working on my own inner work outside of the meeting, because then I think it brings something different. Educators, healthcare, everybody's gonna have their own thing that is important to them. Yeah, thanks for asking.
Hey Sam, my name is Humara. Thank you for the talk, it was great. And it's a related question with these two, is when you are doing the graphic facilitation as the agent that needs to capture the information, how do you either bring awareness of your own filter and like what information gets captured, what doesn't, and how do you remain objective or say like, this is Sam's stamp versus Amanda's versus anybody else that's doing the actual capturing, to say, this is the group's message versus this is the group's message filtered through my perspective and experiences, et cetera.
Yeah, so I'm gonna take a stand on this one and say that it's always filtered through my perspective. Yeah, because I think that it's important that people hire me for who I am and they know that I'm coming from a certain perspective. So I have a body of work. I do a lot of writing about this, and so I think people want to know who they're working with. It's about that relationship ahead of time. Yeah, so in the moment, there are things that you do to make like that we would do if we're working together to make my role more transparent. So I'm introduced in a really specific way. People in the room understand my role. They understand why I'm there. Sometimes it's to be very quiet in the background, and sometimes it's there to talk with the group the whole time. So these are all ways that we're very clear about roles, and those are all negotiated ahead of time. That's not something that you just kind of show up and you're like, maybe today I'll do this, because that's not about serving the group. Does that answer? Okay, great. Yeah.
I'm going to go over here.
These are great questions. Yeah.
A question of practicality. My name is Catherine. If I was going to bring someone in to do graphic facilitation, what do I need to think about in terms of accessibility? Because now we often will have somebody who's signing come in, right, if we're talking, but now we're drawing and there's the visual side to it. What does accessibility mean in your conversations?
Oh, that's a great one. I think that there's an infinite number of ways that you can support accessibility in your events. Everything from being scent free to the choice of venue to what time you start in the morning. Like, these are all considerations, right? So visuals will never replace signing. That's a totally important distinction. So that's really great. Things to think about around.
Because now I might have people who can't see, right?
That's
visual
right.
impairments.
Yeah, I would say that it's about being additive. So it's an and, not an or. So the more things that you can do, the better. So this might be one tool that reaches a chunk of your participants or a chunk of your audience, but not everybody. Just like the signing isn't going to reach everybody.
And so out of curiosity, do you have visual interpreters? Have you ever had that in a meeting?
Wow. No. That's amazing.
New role.
Yeah.
Anybody? Somebody?
Yeah.
It was
but
first here.
But it does
Okay.
remind me. That's fantastic. It does remind me that there are other people who do this type of synthesizing in really innovative ways. So there is a dance troupe in Chicago who interprets headlines through dance. Right? So there are other ways of making sense from what is happening with our bodies and with drawings and with music. And I'm sure there's somebody who performed it's a bit intense for the morning, I guess. On a cello, what climate change temperatures are doing, and it's the one that goes off the chart because you can't hear it anymore. And that's a way of it's the art plus the sense making, right? So yeah, I am not going to be a sign language replacement ever. It's just one more way of engaging people. Yeah.
Hi, Sam. My name is Luke. I had a question that came up when I was watching your talk and also in our breakout group. And your charts that you do are gorgeous. And I was really curious how you plan the composition of your charts, because you have them nicely balanced and there's no margins that are jammed with the final pictures. How do you do that?
I love this question. Okay, the answer is if you're the last person to talk, I just don't draw what you say.
Handing the microphone back.
It's not true. It's not true. It comes with practice. There's a few things that I use to kind of help balance the composition. So one, I know roughly how much somebody can talk in a 30-minute keynote, and I know how much people are going to talk in a workshop. And so you just learn that different types of meetings require more paper. And if the group say we're going along and the group is like, whoa, hold the horses, we're actually talking about the wrong thing, you just stop and you literally leave that paper and put up new paper, and then you follow what they're going to do. So it might look great. I've chosen ones that are visually pleasing, but there are also maps that, somebody promised me a 20-minute talk and gets up and it's 2. And so it's just one chunk in the middle, and that's all it needed. So yeah, process and product. Yeah.
Or sometimes, Amanda, you draw right off the edge of the paper.
Yeah, and that's totally
just
fine.
Whoop, right, and just somebody over here. Okay.
Yeah, and then in front too.
Hi, Sam. My name is Kelsey.
Hi.
I'm wondering, when you are graphic recording, if you have any stories of times where it didn't work so well and why you thought that might happen, or any interesting.
Oh yeah.
Any stories about that?
Yeah. Yeah, I was told to prep the really embarrassing ones, and I have a mental block. So self-preservation. Yeah, the ones where it doesn't work is when people treat the graphic facilitator or the graphic recorder like furniture. And I haven't been able to get any kind of insight ahead of time about why I'm there. And so I'm stuck in a corner or in like the very, very back of the room, and nobody knows what I'm doing or why it's there. And at the end, there's just no point. So no matter how pretty it might look, like if there's no reason or it's not going to be shared, then it's kind of a disaster. So so that would be one example. Another example is somebody. I was in a room that had a ledge along the wall, and they promised me a really big flat wall, and actually it was a ledge that was about this, and they're like, oh, you can just stand on that. And I'm like, no. So that was very stressful. So there's a lot of stuff around logistics that just, everybody's got their horror stories. I did not stand on the ledge. Yes. Great.
Thanks. Hi, Sam.
Hi, Robin.
So I have a question about the balance. Somebody else picked up on this in their question between facilitating and recording. And in my job, I facilitate sometimes, and I find it often takes two of us, one to lead the conversation and the other to take notes and so on. And so in your work, how do you achieve that balance, and which of those roles do you tend to take on?
Great. Yeah, this is important. So this is about the jargon in our field that is something I didn't want to get into the talk. And so there's two roles. And some people will say graphic facilitation is both, and some people will say, no, it's graphic recording and separately as graphic facilitation. This is not as important as figuring out why somebody is hiring you and why you're in that room. So sometimes I am not talking, but I am a thought partner ahead of time for all the reasons why the drawings are in the room. So we might make really deliberate choices around like what is being recorded and how, because we're trying to get to a specific point in that meeting. But I'm not talking. Sometimes I'm in the room where I'm doing both, and so we're drawing and then we're talking and then we're drawing and then we're talking. So it's both. And so when you work with somebody, it's important to know what their preferences are and what's expected. I would never get up in front of a room of 500 people and expect that I could draw and talk at the same time. I just can't do it. Some people can, but not me.
And do you have a colleague who does the facilitation when you're graphic recording, or is it often someone internal to the organization who does the facilitation?
Yeah, so great question. Sometimes an organization will approach me and then I will partner up with the best facilitator that I think meets what the person needs. Maybe it's somebody who specializes in like healthcare organizational change, or maybe there's somebody who's like a national speaker who really is going to kind of bring that like oomph to the room. And sometimes, more often, the client will ask me and the facilitator separately. And then it's our job to pair up ahead of time, which is great because then we operate seamlessly to show a united approach to everybody. Yeah. And sometimes, it's like the RFP process and you're bidding on stuff and then you put together a team. But yeah, so it's this nice kind of balance of getting to meet, like the joy is getting to meet all these different facilitators and learn from them. Some people will like work a room with like 2 sentences. Like they'll just have like this way and this presence. And some people like really are outgoing and exuberant, and then that's how they get everything going too. I love it, learning from everybody.
1 or 2 more, and then we're going to have to wrap it up.
Hi, my name is Hannah. Thank you for a great talk. I was wondering what kind of medium you use. Like, do you only use pen, like felt pens, or do you ever use paint, etc.?
Oh yeah, great question. Everything. So my go-to are giant, really cheap paper and these special markers that are refillable. And there's this one company that makes them in Germany, which has incredible environmental standards, and everything is refillable and reusable inside. So those are my favorite because they don't smell, and you go through a lot of markers. So that is like super important to me. Good for my health and good for the planet. And then pastels on top of that, and sometimes I use paint. It depends on if I'm working on something a lot bigger or more permanent. And then I do a lot of digital work as well. Yeah.
Last question. Are you sure? Is it good?
Of course it's good.
One quick question first. What company of markers does not produce markers that smell?
Yeah.
Help us out here.
Yeah. So they're called Neuland, and Neuland, Neuland. And it comes in you can go only online. They come from Germany. It's a beautiful catalog. You will smell the catalog. You'll be happy. I can tell you the graphic facilitators get the catalog in the mail, and people were posting selfies with the catalog. It's like, see, yeah.
For a longer question, have you ever worked a group of people through doing their own drawings and facilitating themselves? How do you get people comfortable with the doodling and drawing process?
Yeah, great questions. That is a series of exercises. So everything from icebreakers to trying out stuff on your own, working big, figuring out how to draw with your left hand, your non-dominant hand. That old like draw without picking up the pencil, and you have to like, okay, this is worth explaining. You put your hand, this is to like let go of the perfectionism in all of us, right? You put an object that you don't know in a paper bag, and you draw with your other hand. And you have to figure out how to connect both hands at the same time. And the drawings look like nothing, right? But it shows you that you can draw, and it doesn't have to look like the perfect chair or look like the perfect little tiny car, whatever it is. Lots of things like that.
We just took a vote.
Yeah.
We're going to hire you to do a workshop with our community and
I'd love to.
get you paid, because you're not getting paid for today. Thank you.
Thanks, Mark.
Very much. Thanks to Sam.